The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
All right. This is Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast.
That it is.
It was a busy weekend at the movie theater.
It was. For everyone.
Nathan? How was Barbenheimer for you?
Oppenheimer's amazing.
The Heimer part's great, right?
I'm not the target demographic for Barbie.
Fair enough. All
Good
right.
way of putting it.
Sam, you didn't see Barbie, but you did see Oppenheimer.
I did.
Good movie?
Great movie.
Can't wait to talk about it. We're going to do that up next after this little nugget of information from the guys over at the Reverend and the Reprobate, and then we'll talk a little bit about Oppenheimer and walking out of the theater and seeing a bunch of happy people wearing pink while we're depressed because the world was going to come to an end. This is Tatooine Sons.
We are the Reverend and the Reprobate, just two best buds interviewing people we have no business talking to. I'm Lucas Pinkard.
I'm Dan Gibson. These aren't tears on my face.
Every Thursday, we interview somebody else from our favorite fandoms and yours. You can check those interviews out on the Christian Nerd HQ Network. You can find us on YouTube at RevRep Podcast at ReverendRep.com. And if you can't remember our name, just go to BaconOffice.com. It's way easier to find. New episodes every Thursday. Thank you guys for supporting Christian Nerd HQ, and check out the Reverend and the Reprobate.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to this.
It was a movie.
It was one of the movies of all time.
It was one of the movies of all time.
When we saw the very first trailer to that,
We weren't interested.
We knew that this movie wasn't for us.
No, I wasn't interested.
So why did you go to a movie?
Because
You got very confident all of a sudden.
He did.
some friends asked me to go, and I said the only reason I would go is if we went to see Oppenheimer
Okay.
ahead of it. And they said that they were already planning on that. So I said, I'll go see Oppenheimer, but I might not see Barbie. And they said, no, you have to go see Barbie if we go see Oppenheimer. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I'll compare and contrast. Now, seeing Oppenheimer before might have actually been a mistake because you go from a masterpiece of filmmaking to Barbie, which sounds a lot worse than it actually is. Barbie is a great movie for people that it's made for. It wasn't made for me in any way, shape, or form. Was it a movie that I would have enjoyed? Just I'm not the target demographic for that movie. I didn't find it funny. Thought the writing was a little off, pacing was a little off.
It was so bright in color that it gave you a headache.
It genuinely gave me a headache, and I didn't relate to any of it because I wasn't meant to watch this movie.
But that's the beauty of cinema.
Right. It's
You get to
subjective.
go to, you should go to movies you enjoy
And no matter
and not worry about movies you don't.
Exactly. And no matter what, this was an amazing weekend for cinemas, and that's all that matters. And
All right.
because it was the biggest weekend since Endgame.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Which is amazing to see.
is.
It shows that cinemas and theaters aren't dead. Like some people were saying they were.
It was a big weekend for the theater.
It does kind of feel like, though, this weekend and the movies, like when you go to McDonald's as a kid and they had like boy toys,
The boy
and
toys
girl,
and the
girl toys. Like,
Yeah,
you knew
yeah.
which one you were going for.
And then
One
you're
was beginning.
disappointed when you get the girl toy and you can't go back.
Like when you
asking
go
for a
through
different
drive-thru.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they gave you the girl.
You get home.
You got the Barbie toy instead of the Transformer.
Yeah. And you're like, dang it. I can't even go back to ask for the ice cream exchange for this.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. You okay over there?
Yeah, I'm good.
We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story, it is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why we talk about big mythological stories, which Oppenheimer is hard to fit into that.
Prometheus.
But there's some connections. We can definitely. Are you familiar with that story and how it connects?
Slightly. Not a ton, but I know slight amount of...
All I know is he stole fire from the gods, gave it to humanity, and then he was chained to a rock, and every day, like I think a crow came and ate his liver.
Yeah.
That's
Greek mythology.
That's about all I know too. So
Greek mythology is weird.
It's kind of all I know, but I know like a couple more things, but that's about it. So
it is an interesting comparison to Oppenheimer. Just because I feel like I want to say it again this week. We are the only fan podcast who have named a canon Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer and the director of The Last Jedi and Brick and Looper and
still gotta watch Looper or something.
Knives Out and Glass Onion and
whatever his next endeavor.
A bunch of Walking Dead episodes that are considered the best episodes in the history of the show. Absolutely, that's where he like really cut his
and Breaking Bad as well, didn't he?
Oh, was it Breaking Bad? I think
he might have done both.
I think it was Breaking.
I didn't watch either of those series, so that's but his name is Ryan Johnson, and he's amazing.
And
he did Poker Face as well, which we haven't watched, but it did that.
And Poker Face. I started to watch an episode of it, and I just didn't. It didn't work for me. But anyway, this is it. So we're not here to talk about Ryan Johnson, and we're not here to talk about Barbie.
We're talking about the greatest director,
Christopher Nolan,
in our time,
and what has been widely suggested through social media, at least, is his greatest film, Oppenheimer.
That's recency bias.
Oh, you think so?
I do.
What's his greatest film, Nate?
Inception.
That's your favorite.
No.
It's hard.
I genuinely do believe, and I can.
We won't need
say
to get into
firmly
about that, but
that Nolan probably believes the same, because Nolan started writing the script for Inception after his first film. And so it took him 10 years to write the script.
Wow.
It was his biggest passion project that he's done. So I personally believe that.
I'm surprised
Inception's
Owen Wilson
the best.
what do you think is the best Nolan movie, Sam?
Well, my favorite's Interstellar, for sure.
Okay.
What's the best one then?
Probably Interstellar, but hey,
Get on to me.
But Oppenheimer is really good. I need to see it again to kind of help.
You're going Thursday night next again.
Yeah. A bunch of our buddies. You know, we heard that a bunch of guys in our friend group hadn't seen it. We're like, well, we need to get a time to go. And so the only time that seemed to work for most people was Thursday. But then it turns out that the only people that worked for were people who had already seen the movie. So it's a bunch of us going to see the movie again on Thursday, but we're going to see it in IMAX, which a lot of the guys hadn't gotten that opportunity yet. And I told them that it is a religious experience. So
It is good. I don't know if I have a favorite.
We need to change
Christopher
that.
Nolan.
We need to change that.
usually have favorites.
I don't. I'm
rewatch
trying to
Dunkirk.
think. I did not like Dunkirk.
You need to rewatch
I've only watched it one time.
It's much better on another watch.
Well, I didn't like Arrival the first time, and I watched it again, and it was really good.
movie's
That's not a Christopher Nolan movie.
No, I'm just saying,
don't confuse me.
Denis Villeneuve. I don't know how to say it.
But
Dune.
Dune guy.
Yes, yeah. I'm just saying you might like it better.
Okay.
I've seen Dunkirk 2 more times since the time we watched it, and it's better every time, and I can follow it a lot easier now.
Memento was trippy.
Memento's
Good,
great.
though.
Inception is really good.
It's great.
Interstellar, I did not like the first time, but I was dealing with a really crazy thing at work that I literally had to leave the movie theater multiple times. And yeah. So the first time I didn't really like it, but I've seen it since, and it's good. What are some of the others?
Prestige.
The Prestige. That's
that one's
it.
good.
That's it.
That would be
That's
it.
your favorite?
That's my favorite.
I remember you showed that to us when we were not
the
young,
ending
but-
delivers so well
Oh my
in that
gosh.
movie. So that's it. All right.
I still have to watch Insomnia and Following at some point.
Oh yeah, we need to watch those sometime soon.
It's hard to find.
So, let's talk Oppenheimer. General thoughts on the movie before we get into sort of the big themes within it. What are your general thoughts on Oppenheimer, Sam?
I don't want to just say it's really good, because it is really good, but it is very complex. It does not stop at any point to let you breathe. It's like drinking from a fire hose the whole time. They're constantly talking and giving you information, which is fine, but it's a lot to take in that first watch through. So I'm hoping I can understand it a little bit better the next time. But it did a fantastic job of not only telling the history of this event and this person, but showing you who this person was for real. They didn't make Oppenheimer out to be this infallible hero or anything.
It's martyr.
What's that?
He didn't even make him out to be a martyr or anything.
No, he was the protagonist in the movie, but he was not a good guy.
In no way.
In a lot of ways. And I appreciated that they did that. And they handled a very dark subject matter very gracefully, but still made you feel the weight of that whole event and what came out of it.
I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah. But it was beautifully executed. The visuals were stunning, and even more stunning because you know that they're not CGI. Score was fantastic. Acting was top tier. There were so many people I recognized in that movie.
Yes.
I mean, all around it was a masterclass in filmmaking. It feels like.
All right.
I'm not sure what else I can say.
You
got to say something, BB Nate. What did you think about the movie?
My stuff all the time. Sorry, bro.
No, it was a great movie and lived up to my expectations, which were high to begin with, because you see Nolan attached to something, it should be a great movie. And it definitely lived up to that. And I think Cillian Murphy did an amazing job acting. I think Robert Downey Jr. did an amazing job acting. And I think for the little bit that she was in it, Emily Blunt did a great job with what she was given her role. I did not like her. A lot of the time. Horrible mother. But that she was shown to be real. She wasn't infallible. She wasn't perfect. She was really broken. And so was Oppenheimer, and so was most of the people in the movie. And I loved Matt Damon's character, General Groves. He was a lot of fun. He brought levity to the movie that was needed at a lot of points as well. So that was good. And really overall well done movie and well paced, and I don't really have many things. I don't think there's anything that I did not enjoy about the movie that was well done. It was well written, and it is going to dominate the award season next year.
I think that the movie,
due to the strike, whatever happens,
the movie starts off kind of opening sequences, the opening story arc in it, telling you all that you need to know about Robert Oppenheimer, because he starts off as a student in university in London or England, right? He was England, right?
He was England,
yeah,
I think.
And
Cambridge, I think.
He's angry at his professor for not letting him go see Niels Bohr at a lecture, and so he
puts
cyanide into his apple so that it'll kill him. And then wakes up the next morning and begins to realize the insanity of that moment and runs in there to try to stop it, which, interestingly enough, the person that is holding the apple in his hand is the person that he was going to try to see in the lecture and couldn't, Niels Bohr, who's one of the greatest scientists of all time. And
that also ties into something later on in the movie with his moral conflict showing up.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. Yeah, absolutely. Well, like he's got this, he makes a decision he's going to go after something. He does it, and then later realizes, what did I just do? And that is exactly
what happens.
What this entire movie is about.
And they even talk to him about it in the kangaroo court, and like, why did your morals suddenly change after the fact?
Also, why was it called that?
Kangaroo court?
Yeah.
A kangaroo court is just it's a phrase that's been in existence for years and years.
Just accept it, okay?
It's just basically a court that means nothing. It's like they've already decided what they're going to do. It's like a circus.
It was exactly like that.
So it's like they're trying to jump you?
No, I don't think so. Anyway,
I don't know.
Yeah, loved it. I loved the movie. I was disappointed only with the... Listen, the Jean Tuttle is her name, right?
Jean Tatlock.
Tatlock?
Where did you get Tuttle from?
I don't know. I just made it up.
Jean Tuttle.
Kind of sounds like it.
No.
It sounds like a name.
If you weren't remembering the name and you got that close,
I would have
you'd be feeling pretty good about yourself right now.
You know, I would have.
Anyway, Jean Tatlock. That storyline, that character is critical to the storyline of the movie, and the relationship is important, and all of the things in that were important. I think that the delivery of that that character and the way that they went down a path of showing some pretty graphic sex stuff and sex acts and just open extended nudity was completely unnecessary to the storyline of the movie. They could have done both of those elements. They could have left those scenes in without going down the path that they ended up going down. I thought that was a disappointment. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. But other than that, fantastic movie. So let's talk it through. Well, before we do that, I'm curious. You said, Nate, you said that you feel like it's going to just dominate the awards season.
Definitely.
What are some awards you think are sort of at least let's not say they'll win, right? But let's say nominations, guaranteed nominations.
Here,
where are you going?
Can I try, Nate, and see how many of yours I get?
Sure, go ahead.
Best supporting actor
with who?
With RDJ.
Yeah.
Best actor Cillian Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
Best actress.
Actress? It would be supporting actress.
It would supporting actress. Okay, yeah, would be Emily Blunt. Best director,
of course,
Nolan. I think it could win best film,
best picture,
best picture. Best sound design.
No, for sure.
Score, and probably editing.
Yeah, and then let's add
visuals. I meant visuals.
No, let's add best visual effects, best film editing for sure. Best adapted screenplay.
Oh yeah.
Best cinematography.
Yeah.
And it's probably it. I can't think of many.
But do you think that
others,
the movie will be disregarded for a lot of those awards just because of A, its success, and B, the fact that Nolan's attached to it? Because Nolan doesn't get a lot of nominations.
No, I don't.
No, I think I think this is his movie, and I think that
I hope so. He earned it.
I think that they know that. Let's talk a little bit about the storyline on that. You know, kind of opens up where once you kind of set the first 30 minutes or so are just setting up the character.
Well. Yeah, okay. I want to share. So, I mean, one thing I really appreciated or thought was interesting about this movie, and something I didn't know about Oppenheimer going into this, is they did a great job of showing you how he had these great innocent aspirations to be a scientist, to learn more about how the universe works and further humanity's knowledge of nature and science. And that's twisted and manipulated into this not grotesque, but this shadow of what he wanted to be, and it ends up ruining him and his life from that point on. It started off with this innocent, not the words escaping me. Juncture. That's not the word.
Anyway.
But this innocent goal, and it's you see how it's shifted. Now, I'm not saying that Oppenheimer was innocent. Obviously, we just talked about him trying to poison his professor, and that had an effect to how his life turned out. But I thought that was interesting seeing how he was manipulated that way.
It is, kind of tying into that though, because they spend time in that first 30, 40 minutes or so of the film showing him as an idealist politically, as someone that is concerned about refugees, concerned about the labor issues and the poor and the downtrodden, and that's why he's sort of pulled into socialist circles and communist circles and those types of things, not because he's some crazy totalitarian, supporter of the Soviet Union. That's not what it was about. In fact, they even take some time through his wife to communicate that that's not the way that they thought. There's a difference between American communism and Soviet communism in their mind, right? And it was more of an idealistic thing. So he's trying to make the world a better place, right? He's donating to the Spanish resistance and the Civil War. He's trying to do that. He's trying to start a labor union for within the
faculties,
the faculty and stuff. He's trying to do these things that are to try to make the world a better place, and yet he becomes one of the greatest. I mean, can we even say it? I mean, in some ways he becomes one of the greatest villains to ever walk the planet.
Almost an unwitting villain.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting way to set this movie up.
Yeah. I mean, he's not a villain like what we would consider Hitler to be by any means, but he did, he created humanity's way to tool to destroy itself in a way, and he knew he was doing it. They talk about that in the movie. You act guilty now, but where were your hesitations
back then.
yeah, when you were in the process of this, so it's more, I think it's a partially an unwitting villain in a way, but a villain nonetheless.
So the movie really starts to pick up its pacing, and the intensity of the story starts to pick up when the decision is made for J. Robert Oppenheimer to lead the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
And they end up in New Mexico and Los Alamos, and they begin the process of trying to uncover the way to create the first nuclear weapon on that. And Nate, talk about your thoughts on this race against the Nazi regime and this sort of, we have to get there before they do, and the way that's portrayed within the film.
It's portrayed well because it's you might be like, well, why are they racing? Because if they don't get this weapon done first before the Nazis will use it without hesitation, and they talk about that in this movie. The Nazis will continue to use it with absolute no moral case in any way, but the U.S. can use it before them to kind of show, hey, this is we have control over you now. And it was being originally made to destroy the Nazis, so to make it a statement against the Nazis. But after Hitler committed suicide, that the Nazis surrendered.
Yeah, the Nazis surrendered, right?
So it was Japan that was the problem at that point, because they didn't surrender. They don't surrender, or at least they didn't think that they would surrender, even though there were some rumors that they were going to. That's also another moral battle. Do they continue to make this bomb and drop it on Japan and hope that was the right move, or would they have surrendered if they didn't do that? But we'll never know that now. And so it was a really interesting way to show the race and the intensity of everything leading up to this point, because there was so much going on. They had to build this bomb in about 3 years at a certain time.
I think that by the time it took them about 3 years to build it.
Even then, about 2 years in is when the Nazis surrendered. But still, they were barely close enough to build a bomb at that point, and had a year left before the time.
No, I think that it was a lot closer.
It was about halfway through at that point.
No, it was much closer to the end of the building the bomb. It wasn't halfway through, because the Nazis didn't surrender until 1945, and the bomb was still dropped in 1945. So with that, but I think I think that the Nazi storyline is something I had not picked up on in my thought process. Yeah, explain what you were in.
Echo that. I didn't realize that the bombs were built to fend off the Nazis. I always thought it was dropped in Japan. It was built for Japan. But there were a lot of interesting, things that came out of that, knowing that they built it for Germany, and then Germany surrendered, but they're like, well, we're this far, might as well continue. And then they're like, well, we got a bomb. Japan's not surrendering. Guess we got to drop the bombs. Is kind of what it felt like in a way. Like, we've got it, might as well use it, which is horrible, because hundreds of thousands of people were killed just because, we kind of need to use it now. And of course, they found plenty of ways to justify it. But like, one of the most disturbing moments in the whole movie was when they were meeting with that council, deciding where they were going to drop these bombs. And what was it? The
Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of Defense is like, oh no, don't drop it there. My wife and I went on a honeymoon there. I like that spot. What?
That's your determination?
That's purely selfish reasons, because it's aesthetically pleasing.
And you have memories there.
And you have memories.
He said it was due to the cultural significance to the people.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's personal.
And then he throws in that it was his wife and their honeymoon there.
That was like, that alone was like, wow. Dang. Okay, maybe the U.S. isn't entirely like great all the time.
No government was painted in a good light in this movie.
I mean, we were Nazis, but we weren't, great either. No, we're not clean.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I thought that. I mean, it makes sense. It's not like it was a revelation to me that the nuclear program was a race against the Nazis. Even going into the movie, we see that all throughout the trailers, right? The conversation where Oppenheimer and Groves are talking, and he's like, they've got a 12-month head start, and he says no 18, and he's like,
possibly know that?
Yeah, and then the other one is when he says, if we get this, I don't know what will happen or what we'll do with it.
But I know what
but
will
if
happen
they
to the
get it, I
Nazis
know
too.
what will happen if they get it before we do. So, so we knew that, right? But it's the reality of that moment when Europe is won. VE Day is what they call that, victory of Europe, right? That moment happens. It had never quite clicked in my mind, even as a somebody that loves history and has studied history and those things. It never quite clicked in my mind that everything shifted when it became due to in the nuclear program. Everything shifted in that moment from we're no longer focused on this nuclear program to fend off the Nazis and their attempts to create a nuclear weapon that will destroy us. We are now shifting the entire focus of our nuclear program away from that toward now we have to find a completely new justification for our nuclear program. And that nuclear program is to stop the war in Japan.
Well, didn't they cite the Russians a bit too for needing the bomb?
Well, they were constantly that kind of goes into something else I wanted to talk about, but they were seeing the Russians as the Russians have a program, or the Russians are going to want this type of weaponry, and they're going to continue to try to develop it. But they were never. I never got the impression, Nate, you've seen it twice. I never got the impression that there was a race against the Russians.
There wasn't really
during the war.
No, there wasn't a ton. They were just wanting to make sure that the Russians didn't build it before because they didn't know what they would do with it. America wanted to be first, no matter what. It doesn't matter if they were allies or not. They wanted to be sure that America was first in building this bomb. And so even at that point, Truman didn't, after the Trinity test, Truman did not tell Stalin what weapon they created. He just,
you're right.
He created a super weapon,
right?
And that was it. And so Russia still was trying to build a nuclear bomb at that point, but didn't have as much progress as America did of the course. So,
well, let's kind of pivot towards the Russia conversation a little bit, because that's another major theme in this. With Oppenheimer and
especially with the H-bomb.
His connections to the American Communist Party. His wife was a former member of the American Communist Party. He has lots of relationships. His brother was a member of the American Communist Party.
His wife.
All of those types of things with it. There's this theme throughout the building, and then it carries all the way into the post-war period. But this theme of paranoia that someone within the Manhattan Project is leaking secrets about the program to the Russians. There's even this moment where Chevalier, his friend, who's a communist within this, suggests that if someone wanted to leak secrets about the nuclear program, they could get it to the Russians, so that the Russians are on equal footing, and it's actually they use it from like a benevolent perspective, like this is the only way to stop this and or to keep it under wraps and that kind of thing. With it, but that paranoia is a theme throughout this. What were your thoughts on the paranoia, like the generals that were thinking that following Oppenheimer, the potential, either the suicide or the potential murder of Gene Tatlock. I said Tuttle.
Tuttle, close enough.
Anyway,
Tuttle.
what were your thoughts on that element within this, Sam?
Yeah, I didn't realize that they didn't trust their own lead scientists that much. They put this guy in charge of their nuclear weapons program, and they still didn't trust him just because they were that desperate to create this bomb. And I found it interesting. I hadn't realized that the Cold War basically started right after World War II.
And it lasted for about 35 years.
Yeah.
No, it lasted much longer than that. This was 45 was the end of the war, and it didn't really end until like 90, 91, 92.
Yeah.
So, I was finishing high school before the Cold War ended.
So I hadn't realized that it started that early after World War II. So I found that interesting. But Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't think of anything really more.
Okay, Nathan, what are your thoughts on the paranoia piece within the storyline?
Due to it was difficult because they had so many different minds from internationally working on this project, and due to Oppenheimer studying abroad for most of his studies, they were concerned about that, and that was a big part of why this was a problem. And also, his brother and his brother's wife and Kitty and all of that was a huge concern, but they knew the value of Oppenheimer for this project.
Well, they actually say in one point that the reason he was chosen
was because of that, because he could be kept in line.
Right.
And that's what Oppenheimer says to Groves. But it was interesting to see Groves trusted him after getting to know him a lot and trusted that he was loyal to this program, to America, and all that stuff. So it was really more the paranoia from everyone else, from Groves' assistant, forget his name, Nichols. That was really the main cause of that paranoia throughout the government, because he was talking about it, and then he talked about it with Borden and Strauss, and that's what caused Oppenheimer to be put in the kangaroo court, and then Strauss got me the whole problem with that, and then the ending and all that stuff was created from Groves' lieutenant colonel assistant. So it wasn't Groves' fault. And then Colonel Pash as well, to an extent, and it was kind of like the entire government was against Oppenheimer during the creation of the atom bomb, but Oppenheimer didn't really care. He was just focused on his project and didn't care about what happened after that. So it was really interesting to see how they portrayed that.
When we get to that moment, right? So we talked about it. You good? I'm good. All right. Yeah, we talked about it a minute ago when the focus shifts away from getting the bomb before Nazi Germany does, and now it's Nazis. The Nazis have surrendered, and now we're building this bomb, and we're going to use this bomb in order to end the war in the Pacific with Japan. What did that feel like for you guys when they made that shift? With that, and then the conversation with Truman, specifically the president, afterwards, and the mindset there. You've got this idea that Oppenheimer's feeling the guilt as the one that led the program, that developed this weapon that ended up resulting in 200,000 plus 220,000 deaths off of two bombs. With that, and then you've got this crazy interaction with Truman where Truman's like, I'm the one that did it, you don't have anything to feel guilty about, and all this other stuff. Just kind of walk through some of that.
I was like,
Truman wasn't a good president.
Yeah, no, I mean,
well, they paint him in a really, really bad light in one scene in this. I think that's you can't put in an entire 8-year plus presidency, because he assumed the office after Roosevelt died in office. He was his vice president, so he assumed the office during the war, finished out that term, and then was elected twice after that. So, that's a pretty significant thing.
No, so. You're right. You can't judge it based on one interaction,
fictionalized moment.
I thought that was.
It wasn't in black and white, but it very well could have happened.
Yeah, but it's, you kind of can see both sides a bit. Obviously, it's easier to side with Oppenheimer in that scene because we've just followed that whole journey. But Truman does have a point. He was the one who, quote unquote, pulled the trigger on it. All that Oppenheimer did was provide the trigger. It goes up to like the well, I'm not going to go there, but you can.
No,
see
I think you go there, right? So it's is it the gun manufacturer that's responsible for the murder, or is it the person that pulls the trigger, right?
And our courts, and I think most people would say it's the person who pulled the trigger, but you can't blame Oppenheimer's guilt. You can't entirely push that aside, because he knew what he was getting into when he started this, and he knew they were going to drop the bomb on someone. That's why you build a bomb. you're right. It goes back to his professor and the guilt after the fact. He was fully in during the creation or during the poisoning of the apple, but afterwards he's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, you know? So you can see both sides of that interaction in the Oval Office.
Yeah, I think that where the metaphor with like the gun manufacturer versus the person that pulls the trigger breaks down is that the person that created this weapon handed it to the person that was using it to kill 200,000 plus people and was creating it for the person that
and knew what its
purpose was and knew that it was going to be used for something like that. So I think that's the biggest difference. But what are your thoughts on like that decision to actually move forward and go through and the way that they portrayed it? Let's talk a little bit about that. Right? Did they there's people that have big followings that shouldn't because they're knuckleheads.
That's way kinder than I put it.
That have said that they should have portrayed and really shown the bomb dropped on
and that they'll
Hiroshima
lose
and
Oscar
Nagasaki
wins because of it.
I don't want to get any more into that, but anyway, should have shown the bombing itself on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Should have shown the aftermath in that was an important thing. Do you think that there would have? How would this movie have felt different had they shown that, Nate?
I think it was the best decision not to show it because leading into this movie, I didn't know how they were going to approach that because they had to approach that. But I felt like it would be insensitive to show the bombings, show the aftermath. I felt like that wasn't Nolan's place to have a movie detailing the devastation and terror that happened with those bombings. And very proud that he didn't show it. And it's the right decision for this movie because it's a movie about Oppenheimer, not a movie about the atom bomb. This is strictly his story. And Nolan wrote this script in a first-person perspective. And you get everything you need from the terror, from the scene where they're showing pictures of the aftermath and the cameras just focus on Oppenheimer. And after the first picture, he looks away at the entire time. And you hear gasps every time they switch the slide and the details of the striped clothes and everything. And he's just not watching. That tells you everything you need to know. That shows the terror, that because you're seeing it through Oppenheimer's eyes. You're seeing what's going on with him in this moment and the devastation that he's feeling by creating this weapon that just killed 220,000 people. That's insane. That's a toll on a human. And so the fact that they didn't show the bombings was the right move and wouldn't want it any other way. And I think that we definitely understood the message after that.
So, what do you think about them not showing that, and whether or not the movie would have been different had they shown it?
Yeah, I mean, we were getting to that point in the movie where they were talking about the drums being bopped. I'm like, or did I say
drums being bopped?
Yep, yeah,
bombs being dropped.
Bombs being dropped, and I was like, okay, how are they going to handle the aftermath? And I'll admit there was a part of me that's like, I really hope they don't show anything because I'm not sure I can handle that. But then there was also, it's kind of twisted, but maybe like a morbid, like what did happen?
Just curiosity, of what that meant. Yeah.
And ultimately, I'm glad they didn't show it because I have access to the internet. If I really wanted to see information on that,
or other movies or documentaries,
I could easily do it in a quick Google search. And I ultimately decided not to because I didn't need that on my conscience. And I'm glad they didn't force that on me in the movie because you're right, Nate. We got the effect through him watching the presentation, and I know we're going to talk about it, but the town hall scene, and we got the point and the devastation of it. We didn't need a graphic representation of that, and I think you're right. I think that was respectful of the Japanese people because it does seem kind of exploitive to do that, especially in a movie where you're trying to make money. It feels very exploitive to that degree. So I think that he handled it very well. You still got the point, and it was done very tastefully.
I think that the not showing that allows for the town hall sequence to truly be the most horrifying moment in this entire movie. And it's horrifying because it reveals the absolute depravity within us.
Yeah, I mean, because if we lived in that time, we probably would have reacted the same way as everybody.
You're
in that town hall.
celebrating that the war is over. You're celebrating that the bomb did it.
But you're not thinking about what that cost.
And there's people in this town hall stomping and cheering and all this. And you even have Oppenheimer egging it on.
Yeah, I just wish we had
giving the
time
speech.
to use
Yeah,
against the Germans.
Exactly. That's a horrible scene.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
That scene was terrifying to a lot of extents, and boils down a lot to sound design, because they did an amazing job in that scene, from the point of starting that and then saying, I don't remember something, but it's something like everybody gets up and cheers, and then he looks at the people, the sound cuts out. It's just him breathing, and then him talking, and then the chairs moving when people got up, and then crying, and then a scream, and then this devolving into realization of what he just created and what just happened. And then in his mind, an atom bomb going off right there, and seeing somebody's skin peeling off due to the
I think that allows you to understand the horror of the nuclear weapon and what happened, without having to show Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
And then him walking out of the town hall, and people are clapping and cheering and screaming, but
their faces are almost like the caricatures in the way
grotesquely animated.
And he's hearing the cheers, but he's hearing it in a way that he's hearing screams of terror, and then he's seeing a woman sobbing, and he's seeing that as somebody's terrified, and then he's seeing people under the bleachers making out, but he's seeing that as people hiding under the bleachers, and then a guy being kind of comforted in the hall because of we finally did it, but he's seeing that as a guy being comforted in the hall due to losing people, and then somebody vomiting outside because of the terror, and he's seeing these things, and you're able to understand what he's seeing them as, because
that's what happened.
And that's where he started to come from, this perspective of, what did I just create? And this is the moment where the regret starts to set in.
Yeah, your thoughts on the town hall, Sam?
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant way to get the horror of what happened across without, like we said, it just being exploitive and graphic. That scene sticks with you for a while.
It still sticks.
It is disturbing, and I think you're right. I think the sound really helps sell that moment. Also, the kind of claustrophobic, very focused
small.
Cinematography. Everything was like very zoomed in on one aspect of what Oppenheimer was focusing on, and it really it forced you to notice what he was noticing. And it was brilliant how they used positive things that were happening, right? Positive reactions, and just ever so slightly tweaking it to where it becomes something horrifying. It was a really brilliantly written scene.
Yeah. The kind of the antagonist of the movie, in a lot of ways is Strauss. As we're seeing his perspective throughout the movie as well, and his relationship with Oppenheimer.
So he's trying to be approved for cabinet, right?
He's trying to become Secretary of Defense, or to serve in the cabinet of the president of. I think this is Eisenhower at this point. With that. Just thoughts on not just Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Strauss, but the character and sort of his motivations in this. I'll start with you, Nate.
I loved this character because he doesn't really seem like a bad guy for most of the movie.
Yeah.
You see him as somebody that tried to work with Oppenheimer, maybe not always seeing eye to eye with him, but not trying to sabotage him, until about the last 45 minutes when it's revealed that Strauss gave Borden the security files and allowed Borden to send in the letter about how Oppenheimer was a communist, and then Strauss created the Kangaroo Court and hired that prosecutor to completely derail all of that, put in specific board members to go against it, and formulated this plot to get Oppenheimer kicked out of the government. and security clearance revoked and everything that was going on there, and the Atomic Energy Committee as well. And so you see this devolving of this character throughout this movie, eventually seeing kind of this, in a kind of a way, a rabid version of rage and jealousy due to him kind of Oppenheimer mocking Strauss, and it was just an immature,
really petty.
It was very petty, and Alden Ehrenreich's character did a great job of showing how we were acting about that. We were kind of like rooting against him.
Yeah, you kind of, or
you start off and you're like, okay,
his perspective is your perspective.
Yeah. Yes, Alden Ehrenreich was us in that situation, and so it was really well done in showing that. And like, of course, RDJ did a great job portraying the character from us liking him at the beginning to eventually devolving into this character we just disliked a lot. And so
we're happy to see his downfall.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Strauss as well?
Yeah, I thought it was a great way to introduce and portray this quote unquote villain. You know, he claims to just be a what was it, a lowly shoe sales.
Well, that's what Oppenheimer calls him.
And he said just a shoe salesman.
Yeah. So, you know, he's humble, but he's also like, you should take me more seriously than you're actually taking me. And then you're right, the whole court scene where he's openly mocked, basically, just kind of sets him over the edge. And it's such a vindictive mindset to just destroy someone's life because they humiliated you. Like, that's like reverse Flash level petty, you know? But it was shown in the movie in a really interesting way, in that kind of Nolan style, where it was almost like a twist. We realized, all of this was put on by Strauss, who we thought was Oppenheimer's friend for most of the movie. And you're right, it was kind of interesting to see his downfall. And I know this was probably, creative liberty, but the whole JFK.
Oh thing. Yeah, that was fun to tie. That was
like, are they really implying that here?
I didn't gather that at all. There was no implication.
But
whatsoever.
it was interesting to see. It kind of helps tie this movie to the larger story, the larger history of America. Like, I didn't realize that JFK was involved in this side of history as well. He was
a senator at the time. Mm-hmm.
So it kind of helped tie all that in. But you're right. RDJ nailed the character. And you kind of loved to hate him at the end there. So.
Well, I think there's a theme that runs through this entire movie that makes for a really good dad moment.
I am your father.
It starts in the very opening, right? With after Oppenheimer wakes up the morning after lacing the apple with cyanide, right? He wakes up and the realization kicks in that he may have just murdered his professor, and he runs through the university until he comes in there, and then the professor's Niels Bohr's holding the apple, and they're having this conversation, and all he can think about is, how do I get that apple? And even as he reaches to bite the apple, that's when he grabs that apple and he throws it away, and he says, wormhole. There's a wormhole in that, and moves on. This idea of Oppenheimer trying to avoid the consequences of his actions. This theme of consequences is throughout this. You've got the consequences of he's a member of the Communist Party. Mm-hmm. You've got the consequences of he has this mistress in Jean Tatlock. Tatlock. I'm going to get there someday.
Tittle.
I'm going to get there someday. Jean Tatlock. With that, and so he's having this affair, and she ends up committing suicide, right? And he regrets it.
Was murdered.
And I've read more about it over the last couple of days, and it seems pretty. The evidence that it was a murder is pretty shaky.
Of course, the government would hide.
No, anyway. So,
it's just weird that her father burned all of her.
Yeah, this is true. So she dies, and then it's after that you see Oppenheimer, going off, and he's in the wilderness, and he's weeping over her death, and all of this. You've got consequences, even the consequences of the hearing where Oppenheimer mocks and makes fun of Strauss, and Strauss ends up coming back to bite him as a result of that. You've got Strauss and the consequences of the way that he
setting up the kangaroo court, and how that comes out in that, and he loses his seat in the cabinet as a result. And of course, the big consequences is Oppenheimer and what he sees as the result of the development of the nuclear, like that ending
bomb
scene.
Yeah,
an ending scene.
The reality is we tend to the dad moment here is it's easy to look back on the other side of those situations and see the consequences and the results and regret the consequences then. But as we learn with Oppenheimer and the final scene that you just mentioned, once this bomb was made and it was dropped, there's no looking back. So as you know, as we live our lives, as you guys live your lives, right? I mean, there's moments where a small little moment or even a big moment may, there's no turning back in that. And so you need to, it kind of goes back to what we talked about last week with Mission Impossible and choices, right? But in this one, there's consequences to our choices. And we better think about what those consequences could be. It's interesting. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Sam. I don't think you were around, but it was Heisenberg was doing it for the Nazis, right? It's widely believed now that Heisenberg was intentionally sabotaging the Nazi program the entire time. Like Galen Erso in Rogue One and with the Death Star. And then he was going out of his way to keep them from developing it, because he's like, there's no way the Nazis can get this weapon with that. And I think that's a completely different twist on the way you view Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer had this mindset of we got to get it. And Heisenberg had this mindset of there's no way that anybody can get that. And so, there's consequences to our actions with that. So anyway, that was fun. It was a good conversation.
I think so.
I have no idea what we're going to talk about next week.
We'll figure it out.
We always do. So, but that's it. So yeah, check us out next week as well. Thanks for listening to that Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. Where can people find us?
They can find us on Twitter and Facebook.
Oh, no, X. You can find
X.
us on X now.
We're not on Twitter anymore. Twitter ceases to exist. I think Elon Musk is going to find out that there's some consequences to some actions. I think that's going to come back and bite him. But we're on Threads too. We are. It's boring and doesn't work. But anyway,
we're on Instagram.
We are. I don't remember the last.
We're on Facebook.
We do more.
We're active on Facebook.
More. We used to be. Sometimes I'm active on.
But
Facebook.
it's Tatooine Sons, SONS on all of them.
All of them.
Yes.
With that, Twitter is really where we've been.
X is where we are.
X is where we are. X marks the spot. There you go. With that, and what else? We got the Christian Nerd HQ. Make sure you check out all the guys. All the lady we got one lady. We need to get more ladies in the Christian Nerd HQ. But it's kind of like
according to Barbie, yes.
It's kind of like Big Bang Theory, right? You start off with just one lady, and then other ladies will be brought on. So you'll bring them in. So we got to find some nerdy ladies to be a part of the Christian Nerd HQ. Check out all the links in the show notes for all the shows. I think that's going to be pretty much to it. Is there anything else you guys want to say?
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.
Yep, yep.